And we're live.
Woo! All right.
Welcome to the well.
Welcome to the well. How is everybody? I hope everybody is in tonight, and I hope that you're doing well. This is the well. Listen, tonight we're going to talk about something really serious. Panic, fear, anxiety. It's too far familiar for many of us at this moment. The question is, where's God? Where's Jesus? How do we respond? We're told to practice social distancing, to check our temperatures. Our malls, our schools, our offices are closed. Many of us are hearing a word that will be etched into our lives forever. Quarantine. To some, quarantine means alone. It means deserted. It means ostracized. It begs us to ask one question. Where's the quality in quarantine? That's what we're talking about tonight. This feeling of being alone, this feeling of being desolated, this feeling of grieving that we're all feeling across the country. And we're trying to make the best of it. But there are ways to make the best of this moment, and we can do that together. Tonight's question is, again, where is the quality in quarantine? I would ask that you take a moment and share this post, like this post. Like it, share it to folks you think want to be a part of this discussion. We're an interactive church, and we want you to interact with us. So take a moment, share this. We're going to do the same thing, and then we're going to have the conversation. Again, welcome to the well. I think that I am actually sharing it off of my iPad already on my page.
Gotcha. I'll share it on my page as well.
Cool. Awesome. Again, take a quick moment and share this. Share this with folks that you think want to be a part of this. I know there's so many people at home that want to be a part of this. I want to thank everybody who successfully helped us to make our well from 2 weeks ago. We are now spread to an audience of over 1,500 people.
Oh, wow.
So thank you so much for being a part of this community. And we want to continue to make that happen. We want to continue to spread this word. So please share the word. I'm going to take just a moment again to share this to our well page.
I just want to know if the mothers are here today.
Why don't we take just a second? And as I'm sharing, I want to ask this question: how's everybody coping with this? What are you feeling right now? How are you dealing with this?
I would honestly have to say that I, unlike others, have not let the fear of it set in yet. I am a numbers guy, so like looking at the numbers, it doesn't really seem nothing for me to be too alarmed about. If you compare the number of cases or the number of deaths compared to our overall like population, it's still a very, 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 very low percent. So I'm sorry if I have to be that one. I'm not sorry, but I think I'll probably be that one that has to probably get to like 200,000, 300,000 deaths. And I'm like, okay, wait, now we'll take this serious. But it's not to say that I have not been practicing social distancing. It's not to say that I have not been doing the prescribed methods for combating this, which is washing my hands, coughing. I think that coughing in your elbow thing is disgusting. I saw somebody do that, and I was like,
You rather they cough in your hand?
In their hand, their elbow, that's written. No, I'm not going to touch you because we're not supposed to be touching.
Then they touch the shopping cart?
I got not do that. They were coughing in they coughed in their elbow, and I was like, you might need to like get your elbow together because I know that's like probably going to start like a skin disease or something. It was really trifling. But yeah, I don't think I'm not at the point yet where like I'm like in full panic mode. I just don't. Vanessa, what about you?
I feel great. I think I can appreciate the pause button on my life. So I feel like most of my time I'm like running around like work, school, and I don't have time to communicate with friends. So I can appreciate the forced pause button. So I talk to people all day long, like on the phone or Duo since I don't have FaceTime.
Duo.
And it feels more genuine. So I gave up social media for Lent. So I'm not on Facebook or Instagram, but I feel like I get to have genuine conversations with people. Been doing puzzles, reading books.
Coloring any?
No,
You
I
don't
don't really
color?
do coloring. No, but I haven't been doing my schoolwork. But so now I got to get back on to doing what I'm supposed to do. But overall, I really do feel good and at peace. In terms of the fear thing, see, quite the contrary. I'm a numbers person, so I've looked at Italy and I've looked at the other countries, and I'm like, this is gonna get worse first. So I am a little nervous in terms of numbers, but in terms of my personal well-being, I feel good.
I do. Hold on, real quick before we go to Luis. I just want to, like, do y'all, I don't feel like we're going to get that. You know what? Maybe I'm just an American. Go ahead, Luis.
I've been able to kind of catch up on shows, and no, it's just more so. It's not my own well-being that I'm concerned. It's more so the people around me, especially people that you wouldn't even think you have to worry about. They're the ones that are like potentially more at risk than yourself. So it's like I think this has definitely brought up a different perspective in how I handle these pandemics. Because I was thinking, like, I was talking to Ramon earlier about, like, years ago, the H1N1, like, how, compared to this, like, in my perspective, I don't know any of the statistics, so I was speaking out of just my own experience. I feel like that was more deadlier because it didn't have, like, a specific group that they targeted. So, like, people with COVID-19 is, like, you have to have something underlying, and then that's when it gets to the risky factor, but, like, with H1N1, there was no age group, no. From what I remember, like, because I was in middle school, elementary when that happened. But it just makes me, I'm appreciative of like the information that's out there now, because I was not aware of like how dangerous it was for me to be out there, not only for myself but for the people around me, like even.
I have supposedly, I found out yesterday. I don't know. I haven't fact checked it, but I'm gonna believe it. One of my cousins have been diagnosed with it, COVID-19. So I was like, oh, okay. It kind of like when I heard it, it was like, oh yeah, he's diagnosed. And I was like, how long has it been since he's been here? Because I was at my cousin's house. I was like, how long has it been since he's been here? And like, it's been about a couple of days ago. Like, how many days? And they were like 4. I was like, okay.
So we and I just want to welcome people like Mama Annie on and Dr. Walter Lundy on, and so everybody else who's joining us from across the world. We're glad to have you here. Please feel free to interact with us. This is an interactive conversation. As you can see, we're in a different place, but that's what I love about the Well. Is the Well is formatted so that anywhere we go, we are the Well. It doesn't matter if we're on a basketball court, in somebody's house, at a studio, in a church, anywhere we go is the Well, and we're not focused on one building. I know I made a little joke earlier today that we're not being reactive to this situation. We are proactive. We started doing this internet thing a long time ago. So to all of my colleagues across America who are now joining in on this, we welcome you. Listen, so we're talking about this whole pandemic and this anxiety. We're talking about folks who are scared. There's a lot of fear that we're even seeing from the media perspective. I've even noticed that places like CNN have kind of slowed down on saying, we don't want to cause fear. We want to give you the facts. But unfortunately, right, like this has never happened before. And so it's inevitable that we are having an experience in this fear. So let's talk about these numbers. Just today, I looked up and I saw that there are over 80,000 cases here in America by itself. In the United States. Yeah, thank you. And there are over almost 240 deaths in one day. We have surpassed Italy. We have surpassed China. We are experiencing, and we are now the #1 country for this pandemic. And we've experienced over 1,100 deaths in our country thus far. But when you think about that, right? Like I'm also a thought person, as you kind of mentioned or sort of hinted to, Javon. 80,000 cases, 1,100 deaths. So ultimately, percentage-wise, math teacher, that's not right.
Yeah. Right. So that's true. But they have there's the website that we were talking about yesterday. So yes, there are people who have cases, but they haven't resulted yet, if that makes sense. So there's not a conclusion in terms of recovery. So the numbers to compare really to me are recovery versus mortality. Does that make sense? Right? So yes, we could talk about all of the active cases, but then we have to get to the place where after it's active and now we have a conclusion. So you've either recovered or you died. It ends up being like 4% mortality rate. If you compare the number of people that have it versus the ones who died, no, it's much smaller.
And I think the other thing that like jogs my brain about it is that they say Italy had a really bad numbers, correct?
Yeah.
But you have to realize Italy is about comparatively the size of just Arizona. So with that being so small and people being so close, I believe relatively, it is more chances for, because you have 60 million. I think their population is 60 million, somewhere around 60 million. So with like I said, with the size of Italy and it being so small, I believe it is. It was the perfect case for it to spread more rapidly and have higher numbers. Like a New York. I mean, so because New York is actually bigger than Italy.
Yeah, I think the thing about Italy that's really interesting is where, if you look at China, if you look at the United States, we're approximating about a 4% mortality rate. Italy was not that. Italy was hitting at like a 40% mortality rate, which is different. Like that's behaving. It seems like the virus was behaving differently in that particular.
Oh, wow.
Or they didn't have the means to support the individuals to get to a place of recovery. I don't know enough to say, but when I was looking at the results for Italy, definitely almost half of the people were dying.
So, and so just real quick off camera, is my grandmother. So I'm trying to make sure she gets and able to cover and follow just like all of us are. I sent you the link, so it should be on your phone. If you bring it over, Javon, can you just check her phone and make sure she has it?
We like the mamas and the grandmas.
And I want to take a moment just to say hi to my godmother Margaret, who just joined, and OC who's watching. Kalila, welcome. Lauren, welcome. All of the folks, Leon, Andrew, Brother Patrick, and all the people here. Feel free to join in. After we're going to move into this whole anxiety piece, but now that you've heard these numbers, my first question is, and I see Walter says the average age of death in Italy is 80, and those people were already sick or had underlying conditions. Correct. After hearing about having the most deadliest day so far, how does that resonate with you and your spirit?
I think you just have to continue to be aware, and not so much about the direct people you have in contact with, but the people that they then have in contact with, and you won't necessarily know that. So I just think it's further awareness.
Sorry, trying to say grandma.
So listen, let's talk about this real quick from a sort of spiritual aspect and a spiritual place, all right? Though most of you guys are watching, if you're watching, we do come from a sort of a Christian background on this, a spiritual background on this. And so we want to think about things like Exodus 12. In Exodus 12, we see where the Israelites were kept in captivity in Egypt, and Pharaoh had these people, and he wouldn't let them go. He wouldn't let the Egyptians go. He wouldn't let God's people go. And so there was this whole pandemic that God allows to, all these plagues that God allows to spread across the land. And at the end of this whole thing, Jesus says, listen, if you mark your doors with the blood of the Lamb, then we will pass over your house. Because the last pandemic was that all of the firstborn children, those who were human and who were animals, would die. Because God was trying to make the point, right, to those people who were not letting the people go, let my people go. And so they're brought out of this, and then they're brought into a place of wilderness. So they leave from slavery, but then they're brought into the wilderness, right? Okay, so that's one place we see this sort of wilderness. We see the pandemic, and then we see this wilderness period. In Matthew 4, 1 through 11, we talk about the time when Jesus was tempted in the wilderness. And so there's Jesus in the wilderness, and Jesus is out there in the wilderness. And in this moment, Jesus is himself tempted. The devil comes to Jesus and he's talking to Jesus and he's like, listen, if you are the Son of God as you say you are, this is what I'm going to do. And so Jesus is strong in his faith, and Jesus is strong in his faith, and in that moment, Jesus sort of stands strong, and he's denied the opportunity to deny the opportunity. Then we see again in Luke 22 where Jesus is in the garden right before he's taken to the cross, and he's asked his disciples, pray for me so that we won't have to suffer. I don't have to suffer this thing. Jesus is scared. He's literally scared. But then he has this moment of strength where the Holy Spirit leads him. He says, but I know it's not what I want. It's what God wants. And lastly, Matthew 17, when Jesus is on the mountain with his disciples, his 3 disciples, and God's glory is shown. We see all these places in the scriptures where Jesus has these moments, where people have these moments of wilderness. And yet, on each time, at the end of it, Jesus is pretty much like, calm down.
Yeah.
It's going to be okay.
Yeah.
Right? Calm down. So my question is, now that we kind of think about those scriptures and what we've referenced, how can we relate to those stories? How do we find our people? How do we find a relationship to those moments and those rich historical facts?
I just find it interesting. Like a while back, one of the scriptures in the story of how Jesus purposely went into isolation.
Mm-hmm.
I find it interesting that Jesus was God living in man form, and so like the fact that he needed to rest and he needed isolation, like how do we think that we're not going to need that, right? Like no matter how busy we are in our lives, or even in what we want, we're going to need those moments to recharge our batteries. And even if Jesus Christ, the very person that came to this earth to sacrifice ourselves, if he had to do it,
yeah,
of course we're going to have to do it. So I think it, even going back to how you were saying, it was kind of forced isolation or forced calmness for you. I think at first it is a shock for people, especially the busybodies. But I hope and I pray that people are taking the time to, learn themselves and like also understand where they are in their relationship with themselves, the others, and ultimately God.
Yeah.
I've heard people like, oh, I need a hobby now. Like, that's such a great idea. Do it. Like, now is the perfect time to do it. My devotion this morning talked about not necessarily fear per se, but remember, right? And the whole premise was just remember the things that he's already brought you through. Remember the ways that he's already kept you, and know that he is the only person that can do it, right? So in moments like this, I just have to remember, like, through everything that, and of course this is different, this is unprecedented, but if he's brought me and chosen to keep me all the way through, then why wouldn't he do that now? So I continue to pray for his covering, right? Don't let me be foolish. Like, if it's not someplace I'm supposed to go, please let me know.
Mm-hmm.
Shut it down, right? Like, figure out a way for me not to go. But at the same time, just recognizing that he still is ultimately in control. And I think last week we talked a lot about having the wisdom to know, right? Like, using the common sense. It's not faith haphazardly. Like, God's got me, I got it, I'm gonna just I have a Corona party. Like, it's not like that.
I've been to a couple of those.
Okay. 6 feet.
But it was only like 3 or 4 people there. It wasn't that many.
Thanks for clarification. Pastor Rick says he's really struggling with pastors being able to be there for the dying. Definitely. Lauren says, I've worked in the medical field, and the coronavirus is not a new illness. Part of the fear is that so many other diseases, such as swine flu, were treated with such leniency, where now 1/3 of the world is locked down its citizens in their homes and has advised against leaving. This has never happened before. These are not third world countries without health care. These are places like Australia, Italy, Japan, and more modernized civilizations. I honestly feel that we're not receiving the whole truth. Shayla says, remember the Lord always keeps covenant with his people.
Uh-oh. That could be a good or bad thing.
Yeah, well.
Because covenant comes with destruction too.
Oh, when Jesus was on Mount Sinai, the disciples
I like
were.
that people's.
That's my folks, the disciples.
Disciples from DC. That's my peoples from DC.
When Jesus was, do we have other comments?
No.
Okay,
No,
because
we
I'm on the watch party. When Jesus was on Mount Sinai, the disciples were witnesses to God's glory. They got to see God in a way that many other people had not seen. It says that Jesus lit up on that mountain, and so they also were able to see God passing by. I'm sorry, I mixed two stories. Yeah. But they were able to see Jesus light up on that mountain. They got to see God's glory. The Israelites in Egypt, when they got into the wilderness, they also were able to see God's glory. It says that there was a pillar of smoke that led them by day. There was a cloud by night. Cloud by day. And so they got to see God. They got to see God provide water. They got to see God provide food in that wilderness. Jesus, when he was in the wilderness, got to stand on faith, right? He was so in tune with who God was, to stand on the faith that had been built into him. How can we use this time to explore our own faith? How do we use this time to explore our own faith?
I mean, with the world being shut, with our area being shut down, there's less time for distractions, which makes more people find distractions. You know what I'm saying? So, I mean, if you can find the peace in this, and I say this would be a great time to meditate, fast, have some type of some spiritual regimen or something like that. I think that this would be the perfect time to do that. But I think we always want to do it when it's so convenient, and it's so funny that now it probably will seem very inconvenient to like fast, because like I don't know when my next meal's coming, so I'm not going to not eat, or you know the fear behind the lack of food. So why would I stop eating now, or things of that sort. Like I think why I don't know why I'm not as antsy or anxious about this, but it's something about the fear around it and the way it's being handled, especially like through the public. It was just like, oh, okay. And like that's literally been my whole thought process the whole time. It was like, okay. I mean, just something. And I am a bit of a conspiracy theorist, but I'm a lot slightly like adjacent of y'all. So like I get like the fear, the concern, the numbers. Yeah, that sounds great, but I'm just like, when is the world gonna restart? Because I'm ready to get my life back on. Okay, because this being ADHD has really stomped me.
Well, so interesting. Let's stay there for a quick second. Now here's something that's gonna be real interesting. I'm watching Dr. Phil today, and there's a young lady. The young lady who was on is the young lady who, I don't know if you guys saw the video where she licked the toilet bowl.
Dumb people. Yeah,
listen. But so she has the argument, and I know. Did you have a comment?
Yeah, a couple comments. Beyonce said, agree, Ramona. Also feel there is more to what's going on with the coronavirus. Shayla, I think we kind of in tune. She said exactly. Covenant with God means discipline as well as blessing. Hence why we are to be wise and discern the choices we make with free will. To grow in faith unseen requires discipline and a release of control from self to the spirit of the Lord. That's so true, Shayla. Patrick Young said, faith will strengthen you in these times. And Lauren said, great time to begin better spiritual habits.
So, there's and Sister Shayla Johnson says exactly. Did you read that?
Yes.
Okay, gotcha. I'm sorry. So wait, are you on the?
Yeah, I'm on yours.
Oh, do we have anybody on? Because people make comments on the other one, and that's
nobody's been making comments on mine. That's why I came back to it.
Okay. All right. Cool. So one of the things that I think is so interesting was there was this young lady, who thank you. Hey Gina, she says New World Alert
for disciples.
Hey, Godfather Martin, and Gina, and Charles. Yeah. So there's this young girl who has this video. I don't know if you guys have seen it. She licks the toilet, and she says this is the Corona challenge.
That's what she deserved.
Now she didn't get the Corona, but she says it's the Corona challenge. The Corona.
And was this a public toilet?
No. So here's the thing. I found out today that the toilet that she licked is really it's a private, yeah, it was a private toilet on a private jet.
Her boyfriend's private jet.
Yeah. So she says that she bleached the toilet
She
seat.
had her servants bleach.
She had somebody bleach the toilet
her
seat.
boyfriend's private jet. She ain't touching no toilet. I don't have time. I don't want to hear no more.
So here's the thing. Her whole thing is this is a conspiracy theory, right? She's like, listen, why should I be afraid? Because young people are not susceptible to this. She said, yeah, I went to Florida. I had a good time. She says, I did drugs. I drank my alcohol. I made out with folks. And I'm fine. And most of the people that went are fine. And she says, well, right, the government is just making this a scary thing for she says for us because they're afraid that older people are going to be the ones that die from this. And so they're trying to restrict everybody, but they shouldn't restrict us. So there are some folks that are on the total opposite spectrum of this and they're like, no, I'm not really wasting my time being scared. I'm not going to take any precautions. I'm going to do what I want to do.
I mean, if my boyfriend has a private jet, I think I'm of a certain echelon where, like, I don't have to really worry about the toilet paper running out or the food or who going to cook or who going to do this. My boyfriend has a private jet. Okay, she didn't, I mean, like, look at, like, the Bill Gates and the Beyoncés and Jay-Z's and the people like that. I'm not an Instagram person, so I don't know what they're saying on there. But I've said this in many wells before. Rich people don't have broke people problems, okay? And so they are not too worried because they got places they can go be quarantined. They got ballet doctors that come to their house. They probably already got tested because they can afford the trip.
Tested, I'm sure.
So I'm sure it's something. I mean, I'm speaking from a level of privilege that I have, but I'm sure somebody that's that has less than I is probably worried about where their next meal is coming from. You know, like, so I think we all speaking from our own perspectives and our own level of privilege sometimes, especially like her. Like, yeah,
I think the hype of it to me feels very much like a scary movie, right? So it's like I can sit in my house and feel a little uneasy, but I'm looking at it on TV, so it's kind of scary. So like watching CNN, I'm like, ooh. But in my house, like I feel kind of fine. I'm like talking to y'all, like I feel fine. I don't see it. It's not in my close circle.
Like what I'm about to make next to eat. What I'm make next. What I'm experimenting now for lunch.
Yeah, right. Like those are your daily thoughts. So let me go back to reading my book, right? And so it's not a very in your face. I think when you read like the articles of the wife whose husband died and he was 34 and he wasn't feeling well one day, 8 days later he was dead and had no underlying conditions. Like when you read stuff like that, you're like, ooh.
Oh, that's
and Charles says,
I didn't even read that article just for that.
Charles says there's a kid in the hospital with coronavirus after doing that same
Yeah,
challenge.
there is. That's what I thought you were talking about.
No. That was a female.
Because they have a guy. Yeah, I've seen that on I saw that on on Facebook. Even though I shouldn't back on social media, I don't like social media. See, if I wasn't on social media, I would really be oblivious to all of this.
And we had the kid. There was like a teenager who passed away. Now,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
So like I mean, I hear her and I understand, and I'm not saying that some of that isn't true, right? I think we do want to protect our most vulnerable, but at the same time, I'm like, people are definitely dying. Like,
Lawrence
that's real.
said, there were fears of financial crisis, and God has extended those, and the government. I guess that would be the government, man, or crisis, and God has extended those due dates. God is trying to show us He is still here. He is showing us that we should not be afraid, so turn back to Him. Take this time to look at ourselves and improve. There's a certain sense of entitlement that comes to those who's never had struggle.
Yeah.
A sense of I can't be touched.
I agree with that.
So here's the thing: we're kind of comparing this with the whole Israelite thing and the people who were in the you guys. We're comparing. Listen, this is the unchurched church where anything can happen. But listen, the reason we love the well is because when you come after all this is over, if you haven't been to one of our true encounters, make sure you find us on our website and find out where we are. Because this is real church where we're ourselves, we're authentic. We don't have no form and format. And listen, I have nothing against the traditional church. I am a member of traditional church, but I believe that we have a room for God in all aspects of life, and that's why we do the well. And so we have these moments like this where they're just real. Listen,
Sorry.
no, it's good, it's good.
It's all
Listen,
Javon's fault.
When the Israelites were in the wilderness, they had time to connect with God. Instead, they chose to complain, they chose to bicker, they chose to have attitudes, they even chose to have false gods. Again, Moses saw this stubbornness. What have you learned about your? And I want to think. My brother Deontay is watching earlier. He said something about he was like, these are moments where people who have some time can now go and maybe start to write plans on how to start their own business, or really start to have a regimented exercise plan. Or what have you learned about yourself? What have you learned about your own self in these moments? I'm asking you people at home too. What have you learned about yourself during these times of social distancing?
I actually don't mind it. Like, I'm a big movie buff and I love TV shows, so like I've been catching up on a lot of that. And then, but I think what helped me is to understand prior to this whole isolation period that we had, I was working on learning myself.
Mm-hmm.
So this is just continued practice in the sense of like understanding like the concerns that I mentioned earlier. What are you doing with them? Like what are things like? How are you preventing, coming in contact? How are you helping yourselves, and how are you helping inform people around you that you're worried about? And also like how are you grounding yourself? Because although you might not recognize it, people's anxiety latches onto you without even you knowing. Like I was at work before they had us telework, and they were talking about how so many people just all of a sudden become germaphobes. And like I had an incident when I was at lunch, and I was grabbing lunch, and this lady, I was standing in front of the door, and the lady was like, I'm like, you can talk. I don't have it. Like you don't have to be rude. Like it's interesting how fear changes our interactions with each other. And I think for me, because I'm grounding myself and understanding myself, I don't. It hasn't really affected me in the sense of like how it should be, how it could have been if I didn't ground myself. Right, like taking the time to like, okay, yes, you're scared of this or you do that, and even like having those conversations with loved ones to help yourself is necessary, and I hope people are doing that, because I can imagine like being in isolation and you have no one to talk to. Like that's scary to think about
that. Pastor Rick says how to start an online church. Shakira says it is finally allowing me some time to accomplish some things that I've been wanting to do for a while. And Brother Patrick said to put more wisdom in my day-to-day life.
Remember your days.
I think it's taught me to really value the folks that are around me, and really, it's it really for me. I know we're talking a lot about anxiety and fear, and I know we knew someone who went to the hospital just for that, the anxiety and the fear of this, and I think it allows you the space to sort of really kind of like come to grips with your own thoughts, your own self-image, right? Like, who am I really? Because I learned a lot about who I am from how I respond to things. Yeah. I'm a survivor of anxiety. Someone who went through anxiety disorder, and it's amazing, right? Like years ago, this probably would have put me in the hospital just from the fear of what would happen to me, what would happen to my loved ones. Oh, I'm sick now, like I'm dying, and those are really real things. And though, right, like, I can laugh and say like I was so over dramatic. At the same time, there's so many folks that are suffering with depression and suffering with anxiety, and so it's a moment that I think we forget about those people. And if you know somebody who's like that, I would
I got a phone
say
number.
check out.
Like I do.
yeah, right. No, please share that at some point, because I think that you really learn about yourself and how you respond. I cannot say that enough. How you respond to something really says a lot about who you are, and this gives us time, I think, to practice learning ourselves, figuring out ourselves, I think there's so many people who run to love, right? I'm gonna run to him. I'm gonna give me a boyfriend. I'm gonna find out who I'm. We're gonna grow together. I'm gonna give me a girlfriend. We're gonna find out we can grow together. I'm going to go to work, and I'll just put my time at work. And so you never really know who you are. But in these moments, I think we all start to get a self-actualization of who we really are.
And if you're comfortable with yourself, right?
Yeah.
Lauren said, I've learned how much I truly miss my husband. Now to spend, I mean, not to sound funny, he's home for a week. Sometimes we get caught up in our routines. We forget that there's a piece missing. Just like our relationship with God, we forget that we need constant relationship, not just when he's in our face on Sundays or when you notice a Bible in the room. We have to remember to put forth an effort in things that are important before they go too far. Adrian Carter said, I've learned how to relax. No matter the trouble, God is in control.
Yeah.
Keep clean, help others.
Just
Time
like
alone. This must,
Alina.
this must come back to peace.
I like that though. Keep clean, help others. Like
Yeah.
underline.
We got some comments. Mama Annie said, maybe this is our message from God. Here's why. Every year we celebrate the resurrection of his coming. We read and hear of his coming. So much has been happening in the world. God is showing the believers as well as the non-believers he is real. It is time for unity, caring, and to share love in ways we have not. Jesus is coming back, praying times. I am taking precautions and appreciate family more. Thank God every day and all day. Arlene again said, alignment with the Lord can put you in a place to hear God, which gives you peace, which is why we need him.
And Gina says that when you are working, she says she learned that when you're working from home, you work more from home than when you're not.
Yep. I can attest to that.
I'm not doing nothing in this house.
I just started working from home Tuesday, and like a lot of people using the internet while I'm doing work, and I'm like panicking, like, oh God, I didn't do enough. And then I check in with my manager, and she's like, yeah, you're doing more than enough. You're good. You're great. But every day I'm like, okay, am I doing enough?
There's some comments on Instagram here. I know many of you are like wondering why I got this phone in front of me, but I've got this live on Instagram. And somebody said, and I love Minister LeVar, what's up, dude? He says he's learned to reset and breathe and rock.
Yes.
Shout out for the plug. If you guys don't have my single, check it out on all streaming media. It's called Breathe and Rock. And
It's perfect. You can play it during the whole quarantine.
That's right, during the whole quarantine. Kalada says, I've learned how selfish, cruel, and nasty the world can be in a time of crisis, especially people who call themselves Christians.
I had a old friend post something today that really like jogged my mind and like which talked about the church. It said, the church should be ashamed because we don't have farms, businesses, hospitals, and things of that sort that we can provide, and now we have to rely on the world to help where it's supposed to be us. And I was like, that really like wow. He was like, while we're busy building churches, we should have been building hospitals and farms and co-ops and stuff like that. And I was like, that is so interesting to me.
But then I also think it takes moments like this for you to have the epiphany so that you can, I think you and I were talking about how what this will do is shift the way things operate in the future, right? And so I think, maybe it took something like this for people to do things differently. Even in the schools now, everybody is shifting into getting ready to do teaching completely online, right? Like, it will absolutely be different. And I think the comment, Lauren was talking about the family, right? And I think that would be my hope, is that in this time, families are unifying, down to parents helping their kids with homework. And they're like, oh my God, they're driving me crazy. But really, that's time that kids don't forget. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? Like, I still remember the times my parents would sit down and force me to do my homework. It drove me crazy at the time, but I reflect, and that's definitely a part of who I am. So I'm hopeful that this time really does bring families together and see the value in the people that you live with every day and don't realize.
And like on the flip side, in the environments that aren't so welcoming or loving, hopefully people will recognize those behaviors, right? Like, okay, I'm not patient with my child as much as I thought I was when it comes to homework. Like the hope is that they can seek help by themselves to get that patience, or even find outside help to say, okay, I don't know how to talk to my kid about this homework because the technology is too advanced, or I'm not really sure what they're learning. How do we help? How can I help them?
Charles says build a mega shelter rather than a mega church.
What do you say to there?
Oh, I'm surprised. I'm curious about New York or some of the places where they're looking for hospital spaces, right? And they're kind of using these convention centers. I'm curious if any churches have opened themselves up. I know it's a little different, but
So what do you think?
about that.
I'm sorry. What do you say then to the people? So I want to go back for a second. We kind of like skipped over, and I want to make sure we stayed there for a quick second. We're talking about what the church can do to respond and how the church responds. And I do want to say there's some churches that think that have done phenomenal jobs about responding. But that brings up another point. There's a guy in Texas who has a really big church that has refused to shut down his church in totality. He talks about the fact that there are young people in his neighborhood. He's got 19 different nationalities that he services, that he prays over. Just like the young lady who was doing the whole toilets, there are folks that he's been able to talk out of suicide because of anxiety during this time.
Right.
And so he says the marshals have tried to shut him down, but he refuses. So you've got on this one hand folks like him who want to open his church because he's coming from, it appears he's coming from a good-hearted place. But then you've got this young lady who's like, a lot of the other young people are like, we're going to Florida, we're going to have our spring break, we're going to party. And of course, we find out that a few of those folks did test positive for the coronavirus. Is there a balance, right? Like, is there a balance? Is it okay? We've got our president who talks about we need to get back into working. He says there are dozens and dozens of Americans that want to get back into working.
Dozens, that's it.
Dozens, it's 12. But where is that balance? Are we being over anxious? And here's the question: is Christians, are we being? There were some churches that said no, we don't want to shut down because if we're truly believers, then God will cover us, right? But then there's people who have, like T.D. Jakes, who says I've got a responsibility to protect my people, and so right, it also says obey the laws of the land. That's the other side of that argument. Where are we? What's the balance of this? Is there a balance?
I mean, I think there is a balance, and most of us kind of stand in between the two polar opposites, right? I think seeing a few people, still providing a hug for the people who lost somebody, you know what I'm saying? Like, I went to a funeral, I was like, I have to hug them, right? So I don't know, I think there's still the leading with compassion, but being wise about the decisions that you make.
And it's so funny because there's two sides to T.D. Jake's statement. He said, I have a responsibility to my people to protect them. If that means if God, and I guess you can also take this back to relationship. If God told T.D. Jake to shut down, but told the man, the other guy, to stay open because that is protecting his people, then it's the same thing. I mean, it's just different. It's the relationship with God. I mean, if T.D., and it's so funny because, you have these preachers like T.D. Jakes, who once they say something like from God to almost to an extent, it can almost seem like it's like a straight prophecy. So if TD shut the church down, we all shut down. But what if the other pastor has such a relationship with God where he's like, God, you tell me what to do. And if God has told him not to shut down to protect his people, because like you said, he has people who are, like recovery drug addicts, anxiety, suicidal people, then he has to stay open to protect his people.
But then, so my challenge with it is like, okay, so you're called to God to keep the church open, but are you relying on the building or the ministries you built from that building? You get what I'm saying? Like, are your people, is your flock too dependent of you and your works, or are they relying on God's works? Like what are you feeding them?
I don't think. And I'm not going to take this out of context. I don't know. I don't think he was. He couldn't. You said it was a pretty large church, right?
Yeah.
I'm sure he couldn't have been talking about self as just one person. I think the ministries that he provides through his churches, such as maybe the outreach, or you said 19 different ethnicities. So there has to be something in there where you have to have a multicultural something that can reach different language barriers, cultural barriers, because there are big differences in language and culture. I mean, especially language barriers, but cultural barriers can even be almost just as big as language barriers. So I'm sure he's not talking about himself per se, but the ministries that I have built in my church that I need to go out to protect my people, I cannot shut them down.
Pastor Rick says, my church is a hospital for sinners. I would not be closed right now, but Sunday I felt like Noah refusing to let people on the ark. Deontay was laughing at the fact that Trump, we said dozens, just a few dozens. Sister Shayla says, good point, Mega Shelter. Wonder what we will learn in all this and what the new normal will be. I pray our leaders and communities don't go back to the way it used to be, forgetting about the lost and least of these. Brother Patrick says, but don't we need to use our wisdom at some point? And Sister Annie says, there's a balance, but it's the fear of the unknown. Yes, your relationship with God. Sister Dora says, but it's also up to the people to make the decision to go to this church. God will cover us, true, but don't put yourself in harm's way when you have a choice to stay home.
This is this. See that goes many ways. You know, it's.
That's that personal conviction.
That's that personal thing, because like I think that personal relationship will tell you stay home. But I'm not downplaying Corona at all. I'm not downplaying COVID-19 at all. Like I am totally understanding its capabilities and what can happen. But to my point, and I'm not going back and I'm not debating with her or anything like that.
Well, while you're thinking, so Deontay says, I believe that we should all be considerate of one another, meaning that young people who are very likely to overthrow the virus should keep the wellness of older people at high priority. Granted, they don't know these people, but we all have old or susceptible family and friends that we care about and love. We are human. For that alone, as a whole, we should be supporting each other. Martin says the balance is faith. I think that's deep, that the balance is faith. I don't know. You know, like I've tormented myself with this. We here at the Well have smallened our number of people in person, or minimized our people that meet in person. Hopefully, we've enlarged our audience and our reach. It's interesting, Javon. I'm really thinking about what you say. And as I watched the pastor talk about this today, there is this place, Martin, of faith that I think we're called to. And what's interesting is faith oftentimes makes people look crazy. It makes people look crazy to the normal society. And so, like the question is because even in this, your question is, where's your faith? I think, though, here's the challenge for me is I don't feel like there are times when I need to move in my faith if I have not heard from God.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like if I have not heard God say, if God is not, because you also have to be able to separate, well, this is what I want from this is what God is saying.
And you talked about it last week. Like you don't tempt God just because you can. Yeah, I know God covers me. That doesn't mean I need to go jump off a bridge, right? Like, yeah, that I have faith that God could save me, but doesn't mean you should do it.
Yeah, absolutely. I was going to talk about the young lady earlier because she licks the toilet, she goes down the floor, and she's like, and so again, she's got to come back and she goes home, and maybe she doesn't have older people like Deontay kind of talked about, but is there a level of responsibility that people should feel like they have, or is it, well, if it's not really me, why do I need to care?
I mean, I think it's easy to say everybody should have a level of responsibility. I think that's easy to say. Doesn't mean that that's how people feel. Clearly.
Charles says, I think the person who stays home or closes down for what they believe is God's word. And the person who goes out or stays open for what they believe is God's work can both be right at the same time.
Yes.
Dora Wallace says, this is a serious case not to be taken lightly. I take it serious because I have parents who I'd like to see on the other side of this virus and who they are in immediate danger because they are over 60 and have conditions that put them at greater risk. I'm God-fearing and I'm faith-driven, but I'm not stupid. Right. And again, that's my opinion. And Martin says, it's about your walk with God. It's what you believe.
I agree with both. Like I agree with, like Charles summed it up. I think for the lady who came after that as well. Like I definitely agree with Dora. But Charles definitely summed it up. I mean, the people that still have to work, are they not strong enough in it? What should they stop working? Because it's that serious, you know what I'm saying? Like if it's that deadly serious, should they just quit their jobs or like be like, no, I'm taking leave of absence because I can't be out here in this? Or should they still have faith? Like our medical workers. What about medical workers felt that way? Then what? Then how would we really feel? But like you said, it's all depending on relationship and your own understanding. I'm you know what? Don't ask me no more questions.
Brother LeVar says, I gotta turn my head to the side. What does the pastor do if the building falls down and he can't go into it?
Ooh.
Also, a presence of common sense, sound mind does mean an absence of faith.
Oh, come on, LeVar. The presence of common sense and a sound mind
Does mean an absence of faith.
Ooh. Well, he just said, thank you, I'm done. That's all I need to say.
You know,
I don't know. I think this is gonna be one of the things people just gonna have to learn to agree to disagree on how you should react, and totally just let people be them. Now I'm not saying warn them because we warn each other, but like if you still want to go out there and you want to be or y'all want to have a get together, great, do that. I won't,
But what happens, right, when the person who does that then comes around you, and then you go around an elderly person, and then that elderly person gets sick? Like, does that person not, one, that person might not even know that they've now spread it that way, but then two, does that person or do you feel some sort of responsibility for the fact that now somebody has died that wouldn't have died if X wouldn't have gone to, say, a party? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I was reading a lot of articles around like people intentionally coughing. Like this is one guy in New Jersey.
Oh my gosh!
Would intentionally coughs on a worker's face because
But that's ridiculous.
the worker told the person like, "Can you scoot back?" So he coughed on it,
and
so he has like a third.
Praise the Lord.
He's like third. He has like terrorist acts. They're accusing him of terrorist acts, pretty much.
And I saw something on Facebook. I don't know if this is real, where the lady somebody went into a grocery store and essentially coughed on $35,000 worth of food.
Yeah, and it was a small chain.
Bring me that food, baby. I'll wash that stuff off real quick, baby. I'm sorry. Go ahead, y'all. Bring me that, bro. I put on my little gloves, and my mama told me how to clean the kitchen, baby. That food be fine.
Shayla Johnson says, sadly, everyone considered an essential worker doesn't feel they can doesn't feel they do not have to go to work because they're living check to check and have mouths to feed and maybe even people to take care of. And on another sad note, they don't even have protection on the job.
Yeah.
Let me get Shakira's. So Shakira, I don't know, me and her, we were talking about this, and she said, my cousin is a nurse and she has tested positive for the coronavirus. Her symptoms have subsided and she is expected and required to be back at work on Saturday. I think if your job is to help others, you should go do your job. But if it's that serious, how's she going to go back to work on Saturday?
Well, I mean,
if she tested positive.
They have preventative measures. Like from my understanding is, the masks are for the people that have it, not for you to prevent yourself from getting it. So like if you have it, you're supposed to put the mask on so you aren't spreading it out.
I think there are two types of masks.
Yeah.
So there's the general mask that keeps your stuff from coming out, right? And then there's this special mask, the something 90, that filters it to keeps it from coming in. But I'm assuming that her cousin is kind of like a cold, not to minimize it, like a cold, not quite like that, but in the sense that she body
she gotta go back to work.
Correct, but in the sense that her body has fought it off, and she now has the antibodies to fight the virus.
So everybody let me shut up. I'm not gonna say that.
But the problem is, if you haven't experienced it, your body doesn't have the antibodies. is the problem because it's a new strand.
How you gonna get the let's
Well,
not
that's
go
the whole
there.
point of like the vaccine. The vaccine introduces
It's
a
like a
tiny
college
amount.
graduate. You need the experience.
Well, Pastor LeVar says, Pastor LeVar, at this point,
N95 masks. That's what we bought to go.
Thank you.
at this point, we also must be careful of spreading the false notion that it's just older people who are at risk.
Right.
Mhm.
People from 1 year old to 70 are being impacted.
And I think, LeVar, what did it say? Like half of the people hospitalized are in that 19 through whatever range. Like absolutely, younger people are getting sick and hospitalized.
So here's what I wanted to kind of make sure I said. Oh, go ahead.
I don't want us to like get off on another topic, but another thing is, sitting at home now and just like thinking about it, how will the economy restart after all of this? Because it's not. I mean, they're just gonna open the doors and then people just gonna flood back, and we might just be that ignorant to just run back out to the house like, because we are Ramon said last week. Who said it? Spain. Rasan said, Americans don't act well when our privileges are taken away. So once they're given back, do you think you will see like people just rushing back into grocery stores, or do you think like it's gonna be like, are we gonna still just like be trapped in our own minds about what was really going on, and will we just stay in the house still?
One of the things that so here's where I wanted to make sure I said this, right? Listen, one of the things that I noticed about the scriptures that we lifted up, and I'm gonna go somewhere with this, when Jesus was on the mountaintop, and he is talking to, I got all these papers, my little notes here. When Jesus is on the mountaintop and he's talking to his disciples, and he comes down from having the three up there, he when he shows his glory, when he brightens up, the disciples said that the disciples cover themselves, they hide themselves, and Jesus touches them and he says, "Don't be afraid." Right? When the Israelites come out of Egypt and they get into the wilderness, Jesus pulls them out of the slavery place into a place where he says, "I'm going to take you to a land of milk and honey." Yeah, getting there is rough, but the promise is that they're going to somewhere where it's a land of milk and honey. When Jesus finishes being tempted by the devil in the wilderness, when he comes down from there, he goes out and he begins to preach the good word to the people. And he oftentimes reminds the disciples, remember, I was there for this. Right. Remember, I was there for that. I think what I would love for people to sort of wrestle with, and I'll end on this question for everybody, I would love for people to find a place of peace in all of this. I want people to reflect on the scriptures. I think this is a moment where you can really ask God, what is it that you want me to learn through this, right? Make it personal and pray for yourselves, but then pray for our country, pray for our world, and ask God, what are you trying to show us?
It's so funny why you were saying that. Each time you said that there was something on the other side that was promised. What is the promise in this on the other side?
I mean, it just depends on the experience. Like, that you asked, like, how is the economy gonna, what is gonna happen afterwards? Like, what if like the small business owner that did happen to close their business, like now they have learned a hard lesson. Like, okay, if I want to be successful, I have to be successful no matter what condition, whether I'm at the top or at the bottom. I need to be able to have plans for either. And for the everyday person. So am I, as far as financial, like, am I financially able to survive through whatever period, whether I have a job or I don't, And I think it's just going back to how, it's just preparing yourself mentally before you do anything physically. Like aligning yourself with what God has for you, but being in the stance and preparing yourself before you even get to that alignment. Like in my eyes, when you are getting ready for an alignment with God, you have to recognize that you first aren't at the alignment, and you have to begin small things to allow yourself to get there. You can't just expect the other side results without the sacrifice.
So in other words, maybe this is disciplining us,
Yeah, that.
right? Like maybe this is disciplining.
Yeah, that's what basically that's what I was saying was just like
Yeah.
that.
Brother Alvin, what's going on, Brother Alvin? Make sure that Alvin, you drop your. You just released a CD. Make sure you let us know how to find that in the
It's
comments.
interview with a songwriter, Alvin Campbell and Total Praise.
Alvin Campbell, and Total Praise just released an album.
Songwriter.
Interview with a songwriter. He's joining us. He says, "I hope we use this to learn balance. I've been seeing a lot of extreme behavior." Sister Shayla says, "When those new Jordans or LeBrons are released, or even the latest Samsung or iPhone, people of color will be the ones to boost the economy, making the purchases. And when the liquor stores in some states open again, people of color and low income will boost sales." Gina says, "If the people who can stay home actually stay home, it will decrease the number of people who test positive, which will in turn decrease the amount of positive people that our healthcare and essential workers will have to care for." Listen, I think in all of this, there is a place for us to find God and to find peace. And I think when you find God and you find peace, you find balance.
Yeah.
I think that this is a moment that all of us can take and really ask ourselves, where's our faith? Where's our spirituality? What do we believe about what comes after the wilderness? Who do we ask those questions to? And I think that's exactly why we have things like this encounter in the well, because we want to be able to have these type of moments where people can talk through their fears, talk through their anxieties, talk through their anxiousness, talk through their depression, and hear that there are other people that are going through the same things that they're going through. But we are finding a place to talk to God and to seek God in all of this. And it's not easy. Mm-hmm. It's not easy, right? Like there's complications, and there's doubt about talking to God. Does God really hear me? Listen, the only difference between some of the folks who have found faith and others is that in the relationship, it's not that you don't doubt, but when you have a real relationship with Jesus as your Savior, you actually have a relationship. You know, listen, I could tell you a dozen times about somebody's grandmother, my great grandmother, who would tell me, you know, Ramon, it's gonna be okay. But if you don't know my great grandmother, right? Like you never experienced the calming that my great grandmother has with her. It's the same thing with God. It's the same thing with Jesus. If you don't have that relationship, how do you experience what everybody else is experiencing?
If I could chime in real quick,
Sure.
I think that's important, especially in terms of who it is. So if you take your relationship with God and liken it to somebody else, for example, let's say your mother when you were growing up and you broke your ankle and you thought like, this is it. And when your mother says to you, no, you're going to be okay. You will make it through it. And you do. You're like, oh, okay. All right. And then you get pneumonia. You know what I'm saying? And your mom's like, listen.
I've never had pneumonia.
Okay. Well, I have. And your mom's like, it's okay. You're going to make it through this. Right. And so then you get better and you're like, okay. So then let's say you have a miscarriage and you're like, this is it. Because of when your mom comes to you and says, listen, and even this, you're going to make it through it. Because every time she said it, you've made it through. I think you're more inclined to feel comforted in her words if you're going to make it through that. So if I liken that sort of relationship, because I know who my mother is, because I trust my mother, right? Then when you think of it like God, I think that's a very comfortable place of understanding the relationship you have to have and understanding and remembering all of the things that he's already brought you through. So if he had your back through all of that, I think that's the issue with the people who were enslaved and then they got into this place of wilderness, like how quickly we forget where you were just a week ago, like a month ago. Remember when you were struggling with that? Like I kept you, I got you. So don't forget me now in this moment.
Brother LeVar, we're going to end here. Brother LeVar says, gotta roll, but love the dialogue. This will forever change the world and how the church functions. I pray that we continue to converse and listen to God and each other. Love you guys. And that's really good, Vanessa.
No, we're going to conversate.
I got these numbers.
Oh, yeah. There's anxiety.
Oh, yeah. Listen, before we close out in prayer, Vanessa's going to give you guys a number. If you are experiencing anxiety or depression or just feeling angst in this moment, there are places that are set up just to help folks who are going through that. And so there's a number.
You can take the number down and you can give it to somebody who might need it. So there are two numbers I'm going to give you. The first one is for anything related to mental health. So if it's somebody's having a depression or anxiety crisis, the number is 1-800-662-4357. That's 1-800-662-4357. And then the other number is the National Suicide Prevention number. So you can actually call this number or you can text this number. So I encourage everybody just keep it in their cell phone. 1-800-273-8255. 1-800-273-8255.
Listen, we want to give a shout out to Amplify. Listen, they are the people who are behind this. You guys, we are actually set up not in the Amplify studio. We are miles from Amplify studio, but we are being broadcast to you through Amplify Studio.
There you go.
And so if you follow, make sure you follow the Amplify Network. You can see it up in the upper corner of your screen. The Amplify Network on Instagram, on Facebook, and on YouTube. Jackie is, I don't know if she wants to come in, but she actually could come in if she wanted to and just say hi to everybody. But she's behind the camera. She's controlling all of the bars that you see and everything. We're so grateful to them to give us this opportunity to build our community. And they're building the network. It is an amazing partnership, and the Well is all about partnerships.
Hey, everyone.
We just want to give a shout out to them for being the creators of the Amplify Network. So again, make sure you follow them, guys. That's so dope. That's really so dope. Cool. We're going to put up the green screen next time so people can see us and some sort of thing like that. You guys at home, I know you guys can't see that for Instagram. There they are. That's right. Listen, they're great people, guys. So make sure you follow Amplify. It's so dope. Listen, we are giving a shout out to all the medical workers, first responders, pastors, preachers who are working in these unprecedented times and making ways out of no ways, literally. We are praying for you, and we are hoping that you have your relationship with God tight, and we're going to be covering you and just sending good energy to all of those places, to all of those folks who are affected by this all across the globe. We are praying for you, and we're hoping that we get through this together for our government, for our politicians, for our president. These are unprecedented times that none of us has experienced, and I do not promote hating anyone in this moment. I promote praying for everybody who's having to deal with this in some way and somehow, because we've never had to deal with this, and hopefully we learn from this. If you want to give to the Well, because we do believe that this is the kind of way that we could do church and reach other people, you can partner with us in giving. And if you want to give, you can give. You can text that to us. It's on the bottom of your screen. To that number. If you want to give $100, text 100 to 84321. We also ask that you follow us on all of our social media. So you can follow us on Facebook and on Instagram at Encounter the Well. The words Encounter the Well. We have a hashtag that says the well is you, because we believe that the well is not. Follow us at Encounter the Well both on Facebook and on Instagram. We're going to try to build our YouTube page. If you want to help us and partner with us and helping us in our technology, we would love for that. We're looking for all types of people who have that kind of gift.
You can do it from home.
You can do it from home. Yeah. You can do it from home. And listen, lastly, make sure to follow us on our website, www.encounterthewell.org. You can email us about anything that you've heard today or want to share at info@encounterthewell.org. Listen, we appreciate you joining us. This has been a magical hour, and we hope that you seek and have seen God move in your life and have heard God in this conversation. We hope that you have heard others talk. Thank you, Gina, for posting the number to the National Suicide Prevention up there, 1-800, and I think that's both the numbers that Vanessa has talked about. And Javon, I'm going to ask that you pray us out if you feel led. We want to pray and cover all those people out there who are dealing with these things. But listen, remember to go with your peace. Find your peace. Ask God about your peace to cover you in peace in this. It is so important in the scriptures Every time that Jesus walked away from the wilderness, that was a moment of peace. And I believe that this will lead to peace for us. You can find that peace. You can call people like us. You can DM us. We will talk to you. But most importantly, find some moments to just sit down, breathe, and meditate and ask God to give you the peace that passes all understanding. I believe God will do that for you.
Yes. Let's bow our heads in prayer. Hold on. First, before I pray, I know a lot of people have seen my page, see our pages. We have one of our family members that has been missing. If you do hear anything about Gerald, aka Chalk, please reach out to us. Don't hesitate. Please pray for him and his family. And pray that he's found safe and sound. And everything happens with that. Father God, we come right now, God, just to say thank you, God. God, we thank you for this day. We thank you for this time, God. God, we thank you right now for just being God and showing your grace and your mercy, which is sufficient for our lives. Father God, we ask right now that you bless and keep every first responder, nurse, doctor, ambulance driver, police officer, everybody that's working on the front lines of this epidemic, of this pandemic, God, and that you keep them and you hold them in your arms. And you keep them healed, keep them whole. And God, we ask right now that you extend that protection and those hedges of protections around our individual families, everyone that's watching, everyone that's sitting right here, God, and everyone that's connected to this population right here, God. We ask right now that you continue just to show yourself strong as you already have. God, we ask right now that you calm minds and you give hope to in a place of fear, God. God, we ask right now for the people that are affected and that have contracted this pandemic, God, that your hand of love and mercy and healing power will still reign, rule, and super rule over their lives, God. You made these bodies, and God, only you can make them go back to operating at the optimal level, God, that you created them to do, God. So, God, we give your name praise, and we give your name honor. God, we ask also that people that are at home quarantine, God, that you give them something to do, God. Give us something to do, God. Inspire us to start a business, to read a book, to do some exercise, God. Don't let this time just be in vain, God. As I prayed last week, I come in agreement with that families and households will be mended, that this will create essential family time, and this will show parents that they need to spend more time with their kids, and kids will want to spend more time with their parents, and older brothers will want to spend time with their younger sisters, and things of that sort. Just that the generational gaps will be mended in this time, God. God, we thank you, and we give you praise, and we give you honor, and we thank you for everything that you've done. It's in Jesus Christ name I pray. Amen.
Amen. And Sister Shayla, thank you all. Good dialogue. Stay clean, calm, and healthy. Blessings. Brother Patrick, thank you all to the well. Be safe, be blessed, be covered with peace. Sammy says, God bless. For real, Louisville, Kentucky. This is Molly's dad, Somalia's dad. After this passes, Dora, I love to partner. I have a youth organization. Yes, Dora, let's talk. Praying for this young man's safe return to his family. Amen. Thank you, guys. We love you, and we will see you soon. Make sure to follow us for updates. Bye, Jackie and Terrence for Amplify, and have a great night, you guys. Stay safe, stay clean, stay loved, and stay in peace.